and make sure this works. And it just went live again. That is so annoying. Not like I clicked go live, it just... Alright, one of you guys say something again so I can make sure your stuff's coming through.
Not
Say something again
something.
so you can make sure that something's going through. This stuff is going. See, I can't even remember. What am I supposed to say?
Something.
Something in the way she moves
Do it one more time.
attracts me like no other lover.
I wouldn't be surprised if they're getting an echo. Hold on, let me see if I can
Something in
fix
the
this.
way she moves me.
Razor, no.
I'm editing article now.
Oh, this is fun. Nope, same thing. God.
You know I can type in how. Well, that's enough on Proton. Let me look at security and privacy. I definitely want Facebook. I got that already.
Well, there's three articles in privacy, so we should just take one each. So I just signed up Joe for the second one.
To Joe.
Yes.
That's actually a good article for me too, but
Test.
I think
You already chosen your article.
I know. I think I posted both of them though. Anyhow, no biggie.
Okay, I got the echo fixed.
I got the echo fixed. And we have 5 minutes before the show.
And Londoner's on.
Are we streaming?
We are streaming.
We are streaming.
Yeah, like I said, it just... I don't even have to press the go live button anymore. It's just as soon as I hit start streaming on OBS, it just does it.
Hey, Londoner. How are things in South Africa? I noticed the last show I did... No, our last streaming show. There were all kinds of comments on all of our things, and I didn't see any of them because I didn't look at any of them. But we had YouTube comments, and we had Telegram comments, and we had Discord comments, and we didn't even talk about any of that stuff. We just kept blabbing.
Well, I looked at some of the YouTube comments and tried to respond, but I wasn't really looking at the Telegram comments.
Well, I'm the kind of guy that tries to keep only one screen up because I have had weaker equipment in the past, and if I had more than one screen up, it'd go crash.
Oh, I should mute myself.
Not while I'm typing it.
You mean like that, Joe?
Just like that. Okay, everybody got Audacity up?
I do. Norbert is still typing.
Just 1 minute. I'm finishing up the final in security.
You've got 2
I've got 2 what?
Minutes.
Okay.
You got plenty of time. We can start whenever.
Okay, I thought I had 2 articles to finish.
You're aging yourself, Moss.
It's still on the air. Did they change the music?
No. Nobody
Norbert,
watches it anymore.
under the Gnome thing, you have Telegrammed.
Yes, that's the name.
Client designed for Gnome.
Client. Okay, that's fair.
Okay, I got.
All right, let's take a nap before we start. We can get started in an hour.
Om.
Oh, I want to pick up heavy things.
Oh my God, what am I doing here?
Aging. Less like fine wine.
Yeah, I age
That
like
was a
milk.
Nice, lovely vintage. You went vinegar, babe.
I age like milk. And Norbert, we haven't had your intro typed in. Imjo? Imjo? You're really going to be Imjo.
I just like messing with you. Better?
That's better. Norbert.
Kernel, not kernel.eu.
Where are you kerneling?
The Linux FX article was kernel.eu, but it's kernel.eu with an A.
Yeah, it's kernel.
Okay.
Oh, this whole show's going to be just for Londoner.
Of course it is. Aren't they all?
Usually.
That's why we talked about adding it to the teams. We wouldn't even have to stream then.
Remember when Popey used to watch?
I am still upset about that.
What?
The one episode Popey was on, I couldn't make.
Oh.
Company he's working for is hiring a lot of people for a lot of positions right now.
What company is that?
I don't know. I saw it on his Mastodon. Since I'm not available to work for anything that actually requires any level of Linux knowledge, I don't know. But I only do Mastodon on my phone and my tablet, and they are not in this room, so as to not provide distractions.
I would try Mastodon, but I don't even use Facebook. So
I've been looking at jobs in the West Coast.
I don't use Facebook either, but anyhow, Popey's company is looking for work-at-home workers and paying money for it.
Nope. Mm-mm.
I think he said they had like 8 openings. Okay. And whenever Norbert's done clacketing,
Gnome gnu's.
Yeah,
No.
that's how you buy. But it would have to pronounce it that way anyway, because it's otherwise it doesn't it loses its meaning in pronunciation.
That's okay. I'm quite okay with lost meaning.
Okay.
Like life, it's not supposed to have meaning.
yeah, we haven't finished filling those things in, huh?
Filling what things in? Did we have any?
Okay, let's
Hold
cut
on,
that
2
down.
minutes, 2 minutes. Did we have any feedback?
There we go.
Okay. I think
When's the last
um
show?
Security. We only have 2 articles,
oh
and we have more than that.
was the first start. Okay.
Facebook, Linux SS, Firefox.
Okay. It's probably enough.
The last show was on the 15th.
Yep.
So
All right.
if we got mail from a person on the 19th, it wasn't on the last show.
Right.
Did I already put it in? I already put it in. Awesome.
Yes, you did. Oh, we don't have dates. Next episode is June the 12th.
Next live is on the 4th.
There we
Tomorrow,
go.
a holiday?
You're a holiday. Nobody
Tomorrow a
remembers that
holiday?
one. Yes, it is. Memorial Day. You don't remember?
Nope. Am I supposed to?
Well, that's why they call it Memorial Day, Joe. I guess they could call it Memorabilia Day.
Or barbecue day?
Okay, let me check if I can actually get Audacity to work. Apparently,
Your Audacity, it better not have the audacity to not work.
Yeah.
mm,
I'm ready to go on Audacity.
I have Audacity right here.
3, 2, 1.
well, I have technical issues again, which
We're
is not.
episode 388.
It
You can't have
says
technical issues.
also. This the polls. This is too loud. So
Oh, do we have a list of shows that still need audio editing?
I will write one up after
Yeah,
the show.
let's do that after the show.
Okay.
The answer is yes. The answer is yes, there are shows that need audio editing. The answer is no, we do not yet have a list, but we will.
Okay. So
Okay. Also plug in Audacity. If I can get this to be not at 100%, maybe my voice will be better. Okay, I think I.
I don't like that Proton loses its mail line. It makes it sound like they lost emails for somebody.
Yes, but okay, you can. I mean, if you want to, you can change it, but it's in line with Ubuntu loses its pulse.
Yeah, definitely.
And I mean, you can change it if you think it's too misleading.
Yeah. Well, Ubuntu losing its pulse, it does. It's dropping pulse, but Proton is not dropping mail or losing any.
Ubuntu has snapped a long time ago.
Yeah.
I I can't believe that I'm saying this, but I'm in Void Linux and I'm ready with Audacity. I haven't managed to get this to work in months.
Mm.
Switching to the Flatpak was the secret. I'm ready to start recording.
Well, that's not as funny, but still, it's more accurate. Well, I'm ready. Are you ready, Norbert?
Maybe.
Audacity?
Yes, it's on. It's open.
Okay, let's do the 3, 2, 1 record. 3, 2, 1, record, Joe. Okay, time for the kitchen sink.
Were we supposed to be recording there?
That's why I said record, Joe.
Oh, okay. Good thing I was recording.
Good thing. 3, 2, 1, 0.
Oh, I stopped my recording because I thought that Joe didn't start recording. I thought it was another.
All
Okay.
right, let's start over.
Okay, I had some unwanted background noise anyway, so it will be
All right. Let me,
beneficial to restart the
Okay,
recording.
back to 3, 2, 1, record.
hold on. I gotta delete everything.
Yeah, it's just edit, delete.
Oh, Ctrl Z.
All right, we ready?
No,
Yeah.
but here it goes.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, record.
Joe's dry humor got me again.
Okay,
It does that.
sync time. 3, 2, 1, 0.
Zero.
It'll do. Hit it, Joe.
Okay. Whew. Getting old. Welcome to mintCast, the podcast for the Linux Mint community for all users of Linux. This is episode 388. This is episode 388.5. Recorded on Sunday, the 29th of May. Spinning my wheels here, I'm Joe.
Having entered the void once again, I'm Norbert.
I'm still Moss.
First up in the news, we have some Gnome news, some intel
You mean-
on
you
Linux
mean-
5.19. The kernel gets even more rusty, Ubuntu loses its pulse, and Proton unifies.
You meant to say we have some Gnome good news, right?
No,
Don't
I really
interrupt.
Didn't. I really didn't. In security and privacy, Facebook has no clue where your data goes. Linux FX dumps user data where? Mozilla fixes a serious vulnerability. Then in our wanderings, Joe starts making videos, Moss's wife starts cruising, and Norbert starts his new laptop. In our innard section, we get some thoughts on Ubuntu 22.04. And finally, the feedback and a couple of suggestions. On to the news. Ubuntu 22.10 to switch to Pipewire by default and drop Pulse Audio. Canonical employee and Ubuntu desktop developer Heather Ellsworth has revealed plans for finally adopting Pipewire as the default sound system instead of Pulse Audio in the upcoming Ubuntu 22.10 release, codenamed Kinetic Kudu. The move to Pipewire by default on Ubuntu started with the current release, Ubuntu 22.04 LTS, Jammy Jellyfish, which ships both with Pipewire and Pulse Audio, but Pipewire is only used for screencasting and screen sharing on Wayland, while Pulse Audio is still being used for the audio processing. In Ubuntu 22.10, Pulse Audio will be removed in favor of Pipewire, a move that is also confirmed by the recent changes in the Ubuntu Meta package. However, it remains to be seen if the Ubuntu devs also decide to adopt the Wire Plumber session and policy manager for Pipewire.
Now it's important to say that they are not removing Pulse from the repos. They're just removing it from the group. So when you install Ubuntu and you select either the Ubuntu minimal desktop or the complete installation, so those groups will not have Pulse Audio, but you can still go back to using Pulse.
And force it to use Pulse instead of Pipewire.
I'm not sure, but you can you will likely be able to, after you install, just install Pulse Audio, which will remove Pipewire Pulse. And on Wire Plumber, I think they should, because Pipewire has a default session manager. I think it's just called Pipewire Session Manager, but it's not meant to be used. It's just a, what is it called? A sample. Yeah.
Okay. On to the next story, Norbert.
We have some new updates on the Gnome development for Gnome 43 and some new Gnome Circle apps. This is from the This Week in Gnome blog. There's a line about the Gnome software app that now lets you install and update applications and system extensions. Now, I looked at the pull request. There wasn't really any mention of extensions. At least I couldn't find it via Control F. So, I mean, it says system extensions. I assume it means that you will be able to search and install Gnome extensions, shell extensions from software, which, if it's true, it's great. But I'm not really sure what I mean by that. There's also a couple of new apps. A new Circle app called Warp, which allows file transfer from one device to the other by sharing a code. So I imagine it's something like AirDrop from Apple, but maybe via QR codes or just copy pasting a code. And there are a couple of new third-party projects that are not in the Gnome Circle apps, but are interesting. One of them is Telegram, which is a GTK4 Telegram client designed for Gnome. It's not on FlatHub yet because it's in a very early stage. I think you can install it in a way, but it's also in the AUR. So if someone wants to try this and they're running Arch, it's in the AUR. There's also a new release for the Emberol music player, which, as it says, it plays music and nothing else. And I think it has a really very intuitive interface. Based on the screenshot, it changes the entire the color scheme of the entire layout based on the album art, and I just like nice looking apps. And there's also Crosswords, which is a simple crossword player and editor. And I don't know if have we covered the 2D gestures already? The Gnome devs are also working on two-dimensional gestures, touchpad gestures, which means instead of, if you want to switch a new workspace and then open up the activities view, you would do a horizontal swipe and then a vertical swipe. But if they implement 2D gestures, you will be just able to do a diagonal swipe from the bottom right to the top left, and it will, in one move, it will switch to workspaces and open the activities overview, which I think it's a more natural feeling way to navigate Gnome. And they have a demonstration video which shows it being used on a touchscreen, which I'm really happy about because I'm using Gnome with a touchscreen. So I think that will most likely be one of my most anticipated features in Gnome 43. If it gets done by Gnome 43, which I hope it will.
That does sound cool.
Moss?
Okay, Linux 5.19 will be super exciting for Intel customers. From Phoronix, Linux 5.18 was christened as stable today, and that in turn will mark the start of the Linux 5.19 merge window. Based on the TAC Next activity, here is a look at the many changes expected to be merged for Linux 5.19. Linux 5.19 is set to bring more Apple M1 enablement work upstream, is particularly heavy on upcoming Intel CPU GPU hardware enablement, has some AMD changes like SEV SNP finally being upstreamed, performance work on exFAT and other file systems, Z-standard compressed firmware support, and much more. On the AMD side, there is also more RDNA 3 enablement work landing in preparation for the Radeon RX 7000 series graphics cards, launching later this year.
Always happy to hear about more Apple M1 support.
Sure, I mean, we're all going to run out and buy one, right?
Mm-hmm. But no,
I'm
it's still good
interested.
to have.
I'm happy about hearing news about compressed file system support because I know that a lot of distros that use Btrfs just have the standard compression on by default, and I've heard that people say that it doesn't really impact performance, that it's really fast, and it makes you think because you have like compressed archives that you download, and you have like snaps which are packages that are compressed by default, and if we have a really good support for and widespread adoption of compressed Btrfs file systems, then maybe all of the compression that can be done should be just left to the file system. And I mean, long term, I'm not just talking about Linux. Maybe this will be a standard. Probably not for downloading files because they have to be compressed on the servers, but maybe one of the thing about snaps is they're slow to start because they have to be copied to RAM, but they also have to be. I'm sorry for bringing up snaps again, but it just occurred to me that this is important. So one of the things that is a bottleneck for loading snaps is they have to be decompressed. But maybe if in the future snaps won't have to be compressed because the file system that is hosting them will be compressed. Maybe that would be one way to improve the snap loading time. Just an idea. So if you want to adopt Btrfs by default, maybe that would improve snap performance. Just an idea.
Okay, Rust for the Linux kernel updated. Utils as Rust version of core utils updated. And this is from Phoronix. While not marked as a pull request yet for maintaining to the kernel, Miguel Ojeda sent out the 7th iteration of the Rust patches for the Linux kernel that add in the infrastructure for building Rust code in the kernel. Separately, version 0.0.14 of Utils was also released, which is the Rust-written replacement to the GNU core utils. This new version fixes Android support and has many fixes and compatibility improvements throughout for contained commands like mv, chown, df, cp, mkdir, and stat, and other common core utils utilities. It seems fairly straightforward.
So the way I understand it, these Rust core utils, as I'll taken to calling this Rust/Linux, is still in a very early stage, but I wonder what distros will adopt this, because it's good that this is an option, and in the long run, it will be most likely beneficial. But because so far, all the distros that use the core utils, the GNU core utils, will they have a reason to switch to this?
Well, I don't know. I guess if it's slightly faster.
Well, I've heard somewhere that Rust is not known for it being fast, but it being memory safe. So it will be more likely just more secure, which might still be a very valid selling point.
Then maybe we'll see it on Tails.
I say selling point, but it's free.
Someone dumped a bunch of water on the kernel and it's getting rustier all the time.
I just spilled my water that I was drinking, so maybe that's why. I actually did.
Okay, Moss.
Okay. Proton Mail is now just Proton offering a privacy ecosystem. From its FOSS, Proton Mail is rebranding itself as Proton to unify all its offerings under a single umbrella. There will no longer be a separate product page for Proton Mail, Proton VPN, or any of its services. Instead of choosing separate upgrades for VPN and Mail, the entire range of services will now be available with a single paid subscription. This also means that the pricing for the premium upgrades is more affordable with the change. There is a new Proton Unlimited plan to offer all the services for a single subscription. I've got mine. I don't have an unlimited, but I've got the paid plan, so.
I haven't used ProtonMail yet, but I might just try it because I've tried. I mean, I'm not using it, but I tried it and I really like the layout. And maybe I should try Proton VPN as well.
Well, at this point, when I got the upgrade, I also deleted my phone app and reinstalled because there was an update of that. I just installed a new one, and I can't get logged into my mail on that new app. So I have let them know. I can log in on my phone through Firefox, but not through the app. And I did notice that since I've enabled beta, they do have the beta of Proton Drive available to me, which I haven't tried yet. Wake up, Joe.
Okay, moving on to security and privacy.
All right. Facebook leaked documents states that they have no control over where your data goes or what they do with it and cannot commit to regulatory requirements. This is from Vice.com. I've just grabbed a bunch of quotes here. Quote, we do not have an adequate level of control and explainability over how our systems use data, end quote, Facebook engineers say in the leaked document. Quote, we built systems with open borders. The result of these open systems and open culture is well described with an analogy. Imagine you hold a bottle of ink in your hand. The bottle of ink is a mixture of all kinds of user data, third-party, first-party, sensitive content data, European, etc. etc. You pour that ink into a lake of water, our open data systems, our open culture, and it flows everywhere. The document read, quote, how do you put that ink back in the bottle? How do you organize it again such that it only flows the allowed places in the lake, end quote. The document, and there's a link in the show notes, was written last year by Facebook privacy engineers on the ad and business product team, whose mission is, quote, to make meaningful connections between people and businesses, end quote, and which, quote, sits at the center of our monetization strategy and is the engine that powers Facebook's growth, end quote, according to a recent job listing that describes the team. Quote, it is a damning admission, but also offers Facebook legal cover because of how much it would cost Facebook to fix this mess, end quote, another former Facebook employee stated. Quote, this document admits what we long suspected, that there is a data free-for-all inside Facebook and that the company has no control whatsoever over the data it holds, end quote. Johnny Ryan, a privacy activist and senior fellow at the Irish Council for Civil Liberties, told Motherboard in an online chat. Quote, it is a black and white recognition of the absence of any data protection. Facebook details how it breaks each principle of data protection law. Everything it does to our data is illegal. You're not allowed to have an internal data free-for-all, end quote.
Well, you could drain the lake, the entire lake, or have it evaporate, and then you could scrape up the leftovers of the ink from the lake bed, put it back into the jar, put some water in there to make it not dry.
Or you could
So
just
basically-
regulate Facebook out of existence, which would be a fun
Yeah,
thing to
well,
do.
leaked documents from Facebook are always interesting.
Yeah,
I
the
almost said they are
solution-
fun, but there's nothing fun about this.
The-
It's like if you were watching an episode of Black Mirror.
Yeah, the solutions that you're suggesting, would work. as analogies, but even, practically, it mentions right there in the article that how much it would cost to fix the mess. So,
So basically, they are creating Skynet, and they have no control over what it does with the data.
pretty much.
Yeah. Yep. I'm for it.
That's cool.
We should bow to our digital overlords.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Linux FX11 contains code which dumps all user data to who? And this is from kernel.eu. The FX keys table contains the metadata for all registered pro licenses for Linux FX, consisting of the license key, email address, and some other stuff. Expiration, quantity of machines licensed, etc. The machines table contains the metadata for all Linux FX installations that have phoned home for the first time. It contains the IP address of the machine, some other metadata ripped off an IP geolocation service set by the client, and the license key if activated. There's only over 20,000 entries in this file, a far cry from the 1 million number claimed by the company. With this information, anybody can correlate an activated installation along with its IP address with its owner's email address, which is not good. A YouTube video by DistroTube states that they fixed it and made it worse. Full details in this article update, and we have both linked here in the show notes.
A little background info on this. Linux FX is a distro that is geared toward the people who might move over from Windows, and it's even themed like Windows, and I think it just uses the stock Windows 11 wallpaper, and they have various proprietary software pre-installed like Chrome, which users moving from Windows might need. So, and apparently there are 20,000 users who have registered their system, because apparently it also has that in common with Windows that you have to register your installation. So apparently these 20,000 people who provided their email addresses could those were just stored in this MySQL database that this person who exploited this could just retrieve very easily, which is not a very good look.
Right. DistroTube actually shows in this video, you go to this web page and it not only lets you log in, it gives you all the login information to that database.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Norbert?
A major security issue affecting Firefox and its derivatives has been patched. And this is from the Mozilla.org website. Two vulnerabilities have been found that enable harmful websites to steal user information. So these are CVE 2022-1802 and CVE 2022-1529. The first one is a prototype pollution in top level of 8 implementation. Second one is an untrusted input used in JavaScript object indexing, leading to prototype pollution. So these are very similar, and they are all related to JavaScript. And JavaScript is the most common way that websites can infect browsers or systems. And this affects essentially Firefox and all of the browsers that are based on it, including the Tor browser. And distros that rely on the Tor browser, for example, Tails. And these were addressed, and these were fixed in Firefox 100.0.2. So if you use a version that is older, you should update. And this is one instance when I really like the. This is one of the cases when I'm really glad that I have switched to the Flatpak of Firefox on my laptop, because this way, when I checked, I was already using this version. And there are short descriptions for these vulnerabilities. First one says, if an attacker was able to corrupt the methods of an array object in JavaScript via prototype pollution, they could have achieved execution of attacker-controlled JavaScript code in a privileged context. So basically, they could just inject whatever they want to the browser and it would run on the browser of the user that is being infected. Second one says an attacker could have sent a message to the parent process where the contents were used to double index into a JavaScript object, leading to prototype pollution, and ultimately attacker controlled JavaScript execution in the privileged parent process. So this is not just one, but two very similar vulnerabilities that were patched. And I think the Tails, the developers of the Tails distro specifically said that it will take them a couple of weeks. So I think around the end of May or sometime in June to release a new version of Tails that will have this patch in the Tor browser. But it also, like I said, affects everything that is based on Firefox, and it's not yet updated to 100.0.2. So this is pretty serious, and it has been fixed. So if you update frequently, you should be fine. But the takeaway message is that JavaScript is the main way for websites to find exploits and infect you with malware.
Okay, and that's it for security. Moving on to the bi-weekly wanderings. And first up is me. Now, I know I talked last time about my son getting a computer for school. Well, work ended up also giving me a laptop. It's pretty nice, and like I mentioned, it will have to have Windows on it because I don't actually own it. i7 10th gen, 16 gig of RAM. But since it's not mine and I can't put Linux on it, I'm not very interested in it. I also started making some YouTube videos that I was talking about on the last show. I have one on creating the earbuds that I use to go along with the one that I have about making the headset. This is great because I got to use a bunch of tools that I've been neglecting. Screen copy was a great way for me to get a blown up view of the camera on my phone and still allow my camera to do the recording. I could have used Droid Cam and OBS so I could use a different microphone, but then I would not have been able to transition from the front camera to the rear camera quickly and easily. Screen copy also allows me to control the phone from the PC, which I find extremely helpful, even just, throughout the day while I'm working. I was also able to switch to screen copy over the network, which means that my phone did not have to be tethered to my computer. After the video was recorded, I needed to link together two videos and cut out a long, boring section, so I loaded up Kdenlive and got the editing all in order. Didn't take very long and pretty easy. However, there was an issue with rendering the video out, and my computer locked up twice trying to do it, which tells me that there was probably something wrong either with my RAM again or with my graphics card. Graphics cards are coming down in price, but right now, so I might look into getting a new one sometime here in the future. So what I ended up doing was I farmed out to one of my laptops to do the rendering, which took a lot longer, but at least it did finish without a lockup. Now, my desktop, the one that locked up, said it was going to do it in about 12 minutes, and then about the 10-minute mark, it would lock up. The laptop that I used, which is the one I'll be talking about in the innards section, was able to do it in about 45 minutes to an hour. But, major differences between my desktop and my laptop. So, anyways, moving on. My son's Galaxy S3 has started acting very odd. The Wi-Fi cuts in and out, and it doesn't like to install many applications. I've tried doing a complete reset on it and wiping everything out and starting over and still having those issues. I was thinking heavily about rooting and ROMing it and talking about it on the show, but I think it is more of a hardware issue in regards to that networking. Now, that being the case, I'm going to look into another phone for him or something that he can use for his audiobooks and some light games. With his birthday coming up in the next couple of weeks, it seems like a good time to get him another phone for his audio listening enjoyment. I do have an S7 that has been my backup phone. It used to be my primary phone, but I keep it around just in case anything does happen to my primary phone. And now that S7 is, it's seen a lot of heavy use, but it still looks like it's in really good condition, but it gets a little warm, and I need to do a battery test on it to make sure that it's fine. It did spend a lot more time than it should have on a charger, so I want to make sure that didn't do any long-term damage to the battery.
Joe, you
Huh.
can get you can get a Pixel 3a or 3a XL pretty cheap as a used phone, and it's got excellent audio.
Yeah, if
And I'm talking 80 or 90 bucks. You can get a
yeah,
really former flagship phone.
yeah. I'm aware. I can even pick up another S7 if I really wanted to for under 100. It will depend on some factors, but if I have a phone that will work, then I'm going to use that one before I go and spend 80 bucks. But if I do need to buy another one, I will definitely look at the Pixels. Okay, Moss, what have you been up to lately?
Okay, we have procured a somewhat mysterious car for my wife, and the dealer who sold it to us also purchased our previous vehicle, which had developed engine trouble, enabling us to at least pay off the loan. The new vehicle is a 2011 Chevy Cruze, and it looks quite nice, but we are the 8th owner of record for an 11-year-old car. The last two human owners, numbers 5 and 6, used a shop in Knoxville, and that shop was kind enough to print copies of the 7 complete work orders they had, which gave us things to look at and ask about. We next found that it needed at least an oil pan seal. The salesman was rather upset that his people hadn't already fixed that, because they were supposed to change all the seals. And he agreed to take the car to his mechanic to fix it, and we took it back to him. We should have it back in the next few days, despite the holiday weekend. We also have received the title from our credit union, so we can convey that to him for the Hyundai that he bought from us. I have had lots of not fun with Ubuntu 22.04, which you will hear some about later in the show. I'm having trouble getting notes done for the next Distro Hoppers Digest, but I'll come around sooner or later. I've really been skewed this month. Every time I try to get back in sync, something else smacks me and knocks me down again. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's emotional stuff, sometimes I'm just flat tired. But Full Circle Weekly News continues to be released on a somewhat regular schedule every week. One just came out this morning, and we will be recording a new episode of Distro Hoppers Digest before the next mintCast. Norbert, what about you?
Well, two things that regularly come up in my wanderings are my university studies and me using Linux, and somehow those two things got tangled up together again. Because okay, that's not how I want to start this. Oh wait, I'm looking at the innards and not the okay. So when I have, for a change, I do have some hardware news because I acquired a new laptop, which I don't do which I don't do often. But my previous one, which was a Lenovo Yoga 300, I think. So it had a plastic chassis, and those were notorious for not holding up too well long term. And I was the second owner of that, and right now it's being held together by superglue, and that is not a very sustainable thing, because a few weeks ago there was a week where I had to bring it to the because a few weeks ago there was a week when I had to bring it to the university for 4 days in a row, and I ended up having to re-glue it together at least 3 times the nights before the days when I had to bring it, because it just kept coming because it just wouldn't hold up. Now sometimes the super glue just holds really well for months. This time it wasn't the case, and I just decided to get a new laptop. When I learned about how these first 2-in-1 Lenovo laptops were designed, I swore that I will not get one of these 2-in-1 laptops again, but I ended up doing it because I just got too spoiled by the touchscreen and being able to use the touchscreen. So now I have a new Lenovo Flex 5, which has an 11th gen Intel i3 processor, so it's a pretty new model. And I have a friend who sells laptops, and he assured me that these new ones are supposed to be way, way better built than the old ones. And it has a metal chassis and not a plastic one, so I'm really happy with it. It has the same screen size, 14 inches, but it's way smaller because it just has a narrower bezel. It just feels like a modern laptop. My previous laptop was kind of big and it wasn't very convenient to carry it around in my bag, but I can just do it with this one, no problem. And I didn't really have to reinstall any systems because I managed to. So first I had to take apart my glued together laptop. I took out the SSD, connected it to the new laptop, and Leo recommended to use RescueZilla, which I used, and I managed to clone my drive. So all of my partitions were cloned successfully. And well, I had to reinstall Refind because for some reason it just wouldn't pick up any of the bootloaders, not Refind or Grub, that I had on the disk. So then I was just able to boot into all three distros that I had on it just fine, which is Fedora, Void, and Debian. But I didn't have any sound in any of them. So turns out there's a fix for this, and I had to install a couple of packages. One of them was alsa-firmware. Okay, I will have to look this up.
While you're doing that, I've noted a lot of differences in quality between different years of even the same model of Lenovo laptops. My T540p seems to be really cheap plastic and it keeps breaking, which since it was sent to me by Owen Peary, he was a little upset, and I was a little upset that it arrived in a broken condition when it wasn't sent that way. On the other hand, my T560 has polycarbonate and fiberglass mixed body, and that's a lot more sturdy. And so I don't know, Lenovo seems to make different decisions every year on how to maintain their product quality.
I don't know. I've just been gravitating towards Dell for the longest time now.
Well, I think I had 4 laptops altogether in my life, and wait, was it 5? It was 5. So out of my 5 laptops, 3 of them have now been Lenovo's, 3 in a row. So
You're still young.
it's well, it's not a conscious choice, but I just find that. So my previous laptop had really good support with Linux. The touch screen, everything just worked. So I had this one, and there was no sound. And I looked up a solution, and I found one for Arch because, of course, there's always a solution for Arch, which suggested that I had to install a couple of packages. One of them being alsa-firmware, another one is alsa-ucm-conf, and the third one, which is sof-firmware. And I tried this in Fedora, and it worked. I tried this in Void, and it worked. And for Debian, I found a different solution, which basically didn't require installing any additional firmware, but I did have to go and create a configuration file, which I think it was trying to load the wrong firmware. And I think I will leave the link for that fix in the description. I have no idea how many devices are affected, but I did find the bug report for this in the Ubuntu forums, which was from 2020, which is from 2020, so 2 years old. So there's a bug that was filed 2 years ago that still affects some devices, which is interesting. So basically, I installed all of the 3 systems to be a minimal system, and then I installed my desktops on top of them. So I have no idea if I had just installed a distro that is ready out of the box, like Ubuntu or Pop! OS or Mint, or even Fedora Workstation, whether the problem would have still be there. I should try that at some point, but it was an interesting challenge.
Joe, my problem with the one Dell that I've had, it had a nice metal body, but it had the worst keyboard I've ever had. And with these fingers, you know I have to have a keyboard.
Yeah, I almost always use an external keyboard.
So I said, so in that week when I had to use a laptop at the university each day, and I had to connect to the university Wi-Fi, which requires me to authenticate to my account, which doesn't always work the best. And I was in Fedora, which I was using daily, and it just wouldn't be. It just fail. It would just fail to authenticate me, and I didn't really know what was the problem. And I just decided to reboot into Debian, which I still keep around because sometimes there are things that might only work in Debian. And I logged into Debian and I authenticated and it worked fine. And I have no idea why, because both systems were using Network Manager. And I gave the same information, same credentials. So maybe it was a different version of Network Manager if something wasn't working properly in Fedora. But once again, having Debian installed saved the day. And it's interesting how every time I have to say, and it's interesting how each time there's something about having to use my laptop in the university, it ends up me being challenged with something, with a problem that that's related to Linux. And it turns out Debian testing, which I still use, I plan to use it until it gets to a stable status, Debian Bookworm, which will be around next summer, I think. And maybe I will just leave it on that, but I don't really want to, even if I don't use it daily, I don't want to part with my Debian partition because it just proves to be really useful from time to time. But since I moved to my new laptop and I cloned my disk, I found myself in using Void a lot more again, more than any of the other two, which of course I still use with Svei, and I did some. So I decided that Void is, because Void is a minimal system, I might as well have this mindset so that I will create a minimal system out of it. So I installed Svei, the Wayland window manager, and I don't really like tiling window manager on my desktop because I like the way XFCE does window management, and it somehow resonates with me. It remembers how I want things to be placed when I open applications. But on my laptop, I don't really want to open more than 2 windows at a time on a workspace. So I find it very comfortable that it tires them by default. And I started using a lot more workspaces. Previously, I would just use 1 or 2 workspaces. Now I sometimes use up to 4 or 5. And I decided to finally look at how to configure Waybar, which is the panel at the top for Svei, because the default one was it was very colorful, but it didn't really feel like something I wanted to use. It didn't really match my wallpaper. So I just turned it to be a completely black bar with white text on it. And white modules like memory usage and time and date and Wi-Fi connection. And once again, I was faced with the problem that Flatpak, when I install Flatpaks, for some reason, in Svei on Void, they don't get added to the variable that is xdg underscore data underscore dirs, the IRS. And there's a couple of scripts in /etc/profile.d. One of them is flatpak.sh. And when you log into your system, it sets up your environment variables. It runs /etc/profile and these scripts in profile.d. But for some reason, Void wasn't doing that for me. It turns out that the display manager I started using and trying out, which is empty with 2 T's, so EMPTTY, it just doesn't read any of the profile scripts by default. It doesn't run .x init rc. It doesn't run .profile anything. So I had to set up in my home folder a .emptty file, and I had to specify for it to run /etc/profile and /etc/profile/d, which I think I didn't have to specify because profile itself defines it. So I added that, and I opened my applications list. All the Flatpaks that I have magically appeared. Previously, I had to either start Flatpaks for the terminal or just assign a key, a keybind to them. But now I can just open them like I would open any other application from an application launcher, which is, it feels very satisfying when there's a problem that I caused myself by switching from something that is very simple and straightforward to use like GDM or LightDM, and switching to something obscure that might require more manual intervention, I wanted to switch to this EMPTTY, the display manager, because sometimes I have trouble with LightDM and Wayland sessions. For example, with EMPTTY, I can just start a Gnome Wayland session, and I think on Void with LightDM I wasn't able to do that previously. So you've heard about distro hopping, you've heard about desktop environment hopping, and now I did some display manager hopping. And it's interesting how I boot into Fedora and I have this mindset that it's GNOME, it's really well built, it's polished. Fedora itself is well built and well configured, so I just use it. And then I boot into Void, and it's like a do-it-yourself project. And it feels really great that with each day, I think I had the laptop for 2 weeks now, and during those 2 weeks, I managed to implement a lot more functionality into my Sway desktop. And now I've been just using it as my main desktop whenever I don't have to do work, just do other stuff. And I think that's what I wanted to say. So thank you for coming to my TED Talk again.
No worries. All right. Moving on to the Linux innards. And today in our Linux innards, we're testing out Ubuntu 2204. Norbert?
And I think I'm the only one who tried stock Ubuntu itself.
Well, yeah, we were trying out different things so that,
different flavors, and I wanted to see specifically what Ubuntu did with GNOME 42. And I noticed that the live session is still in Xorg, and the installer is still the old installer, which I appreciated because I could just open the terminal and run the command ubiquity -b, which will install Ubuntu without installing its bootloader, so I can just use my already existing bootloader. And the installer was still showing old screenshots from Ubuntu, I think 21 something. So it still was using screenshots that have the mixed theme, which were removed in this version of Ubuntu, which was interesting. Because it might be a bit misleading. It's just a small detail, but it was noticeable. And so after that, you are dropped into a Wayland session because that's a default if you're not on NVIDIA. Because it was supposed to be the default on NVIDIA, but then NVIDIA changed their mind in the last minute. But on Integraphics, it defaulted to Wayland. And they did something interesting with the desktop because by default on GNOME, you not only don't have desktop icons, if you just have one single window open, if you have a couple of windows open, even if you click on the desktop, like your wallpaper to empty space, the window that is currently in focus will stay in focus. So in other desktop environments and even Windows, if you click on the desktop, then the desktop itself will be in focus. So then if you press the keybind that closes the window, it will bring up the Windows shadow menu. But on stock GNOME, if there are some windows on the screen, one of them will always be in focus. Now Ubuntu had this extension that brings back window desktop icons for a while, but now you can drag and drop icons from the file browser to the desktop and vice versa, which you couldn't do before. Which is, I think it was implemented in a very smooth way, and you can even click on the desktop and bring focus to the desktop and bring focus away from the windows, which I'm not sure what functionality it holds. Maybe that you can just press Ctrl A and select everything on the desktop, which makes sense. I don't know if this focus shift to the desktop was doable in previous versions, but this is the first time I've noticed it. And the next thing I did is I looked at the wallpaper selection, because I know that a couple of versions ago, I think it was in Hirsute Hippo, they had a really low number of wallpapers. And for each version, they have a different set of wallpapers, but they don't seem to keep the previous ones. If you install a distro like PopOS, it has dozens of great wallpapers. And from version to version, from release to release, they don't remove from the wallpaper selection, they just add to it. So Ubuntu has a different wallpaper pack for each release. So there are packages like Ubuntu-wallpapers- jammy, or ubuntu-wallpapers-hirsuit or impish. But each version only has its own wallpaper pack installed, which maybe has like 6 or 8 wallpapers. So a couple of those are the stock wallpapers, the default wallpapers with the mascot animal of the release, and there are a couple of other ones, usually photographs or renders. And I think it's a shame because there have been a lot of great wallpapers in previous releases that just didn't stick around for the new releases. So I brought up the terminal and I did an apt install ubuntu-wallpapers-**, which installed like 10 or maybe a dozen different wallpaper packs. It took up 200 extra megabytes, but there really are a couple of great wallpapers in there. So what I would like to see in Ubuntu is just to have a wallpaper pack that's called Ubuntu-wallpapers-common, which just include the release generic wallpapers. So if you install like Ubuntu-wallpapers-impish, maybe it could just have the wallpapers that have the impish entry on them. And all of the wallpapers that are not tied to any release, they could just be dumped into one single wallpaper pack so that you could have a couple of dozen nice wallpapers and not just have like 2 or 3 new wallpapers for each release. Because if you,
Now,
like I said,
what command did you use to install?
apt install ubuntu-wallpapers-**. I like that in apt you can just use **, so it will install all of the packages that start with ubuntu-wallpapers. But I think in other package managers you're not able to do that. So this is something I'm missing from like Pacman or DNF. So I don't have the machine that I have Ubuntu right now here, but there's a lot of photographs, for example, that are just nice, and I don't think they should be removed from version to version just because I don't actually know why. I don't actually know why they remove wallpapers.
Well, you probably can't do this in Arch, but in one of your RPM things, you could always install apt2 RPM.
Okay, so while Joe is looking things up, I started the Firefox snap and I started my stopwatch, and it took 13 seconds to start on my 6th generation i5 CPU. So I used my old laptop to do the distro testing, and on the second start it took around 3 seconds to start, which is not bad. I mean, 30 seconds isn't that bad either, but it can be annoying. And so we mentioned that support for the standard compression is getting better, and I'm wondering maybe if in the future all of the distros will use a file system by default that compresses stuff. Maybe compression just wouldn't have to be implemented for snaps separately, and maybe that would improve startup time for snaps. But I wanted to install Flatpaks, but I didn't get around doing that because I just tried out a couple of apps that are snaps. And the Ubuntu Software Center itself, which is a branded snap store, for some reason I didn't notice this before, but in the drop-down list where you can select different branches of the snaps, like stable or development or beta, there's actually an option for the deb package at the bottom. So for some reason I didn't know that you can still install the deb packages from the repos via the Ubuntu Software Center, but it turns out you can. But of course it defaults to the snap by default. I mean, that's understandable because those are more up to date, and even distros like Fedora usually default to the Flatpak if there's a Flatpak of an application. And I just went and updated the software, and it started updating the snaps. But then I got an error message that said the snap store itself was not able to update itself because it is running. So I had to close the snap store for it in order for it to be updated, which was interesting. Because I thought if snaps are always loaded to memory, they could just update and download a new version, and the next time I start it will just start a new version. But for some reason it wasn't able to update itself until it was running. And I assume that wasn't a bug, that is how it's implemented. It was just interesting. And Gnome itself, I was surprised to learn that Gnome 42 has fractional scaling enabled by default. Fractional scaling in Gnome is interesting because if you are running a Wayland session and Wayland native applications, you can set your screen to 125, 150, or 175%, not just 100 or 200. And things scale nice. And I actually turned on fractional scaling and tried it again on my Fedora tablet, because 200 is too big and 100 is way too small. Even 150 was too small, but I settled for 175%. And things don't really look blurry, because of course Firefox is a really native app, even as a even as a Flatpak. But if you try to run an X app via Xwayland, you might get some pixelation or blurriness if you're using fractional scaling, which of course is not enabled by default. Gnome is still considered to be experimental, so I was surprised to learn that Ubuntu just enables it by default. And I mentioned this to Leo because I know that his framework laptop needs fractional scaling because of its resolution. And he did say that he tried it as well in Ubuntu, and he did also see some encounter some problems with apps that are not Wayland native apps. So if we arrive to the point where everything works natively in Wayland, maybe this will be less of an issue. And I really hope that in a couple of releases, Gnome will enable this by default, because it's something that I would really like to see. Even on a 1080p screen, like a 14-inch screen that I have, I never use fractional scaling, but maybe it would be beneficial. I know that my dad uses Windows 11 and he has, I think his laptop just set it to 125, the scaling to 125% by default, and it's what works best for him. So maybe having like 125% scaling would be beneficial for people. But other than this version of Ubuntu feels a lot more polished than the previous versions, and I'm kind of sad that they didn't get Pipewire ready for this release, but it also makes sense that they didn't want to risk having Pipewire introduced as an audio server in an LTS, because in the interim releases they have time to sort things out. And I also assume they have a little catching up to do with Fedora's and Tumble and OpenSUSE's and Archie's implementation of Pipewire. But I really like the fact that they are working toward having Wayland be the default on NVIDIA. So maybe in the next release or the release after that, we will also see that. All around, my only problem is the loading time for snaps, which I imagine a lot of people have that. For a lot of people, that's the main problem they have with Ubuntu. So if that was solved, I could use it.
No, I know that's being worked on.
Yeah. I know that I've heard that they want to do a major overhaul on how snaps work, which I'm all in for, because, I mean, as much as people like to hate on snaps, I would rather have snaps improve than just die, because it's good to have options. And if there's a packaging format that has a potential to improve, I think they deserve all the chances that the user base can give them.
Are you all done?
Yeah, I wanted to try Ubuntu as well, just because I like XFCE, but I haven't, so it's all yours, Joe.
Okay. Well, I installed the Mate version because I like Mate way more than I like Gnome, even though I haven't used it in a really long time. I would have gone for Cinnamon, but the Cinnamon Ubuntu or the Ubuntu Cinnamon is not an official flavor, and I wanted to make sure that I used an official flavor. The install was pretty easy, and I didn't have any major issues with that. It was hardly noticeable, just a regular standard install. I did notice what I have to assume is some theming issues in regards to applications that I installed, but I'll get to that in a few minutes. Now, I think it is a function of Mate as opposed to Ubuntu, but I did notice that it wasn't very intuitive to pin things to the panel bar. I had to right-click, add to panel, application launcher, and then find the correct application, as opposed to just right-clicking an application and hitting add to panel. Now, Moss informs me that there is a much more intuitive way to do it. You can open the menu and just click and drag an app's icon to the panel. He says it works in most desktops, but it's easier in Mate than he has found it to be in other desktops, XFC, LXQT. But for me, it just wasn't very intuitive. I think I just got too used to Cinnamon, find the application, right-click it, and add to panel or pin to panel, and you're done. So maybe that's just on me, but it was something, it doesn't seem very intuitive to me. Now,
Yeah, the difference is that when it works, it means that on the panel, the applet that shows the open applications also serves as a quick launch menu. So if you pin something and you have no windows open, it will just serve as an icon to start it.
right.
But on XFCE, you could add icons to quick launch icons like a Mate, but the applet that shows your open windows, you are not able to pin those there. Those just show the open
Right.
windows.
And
So if you had Firefox and the file browser pinned and you had a window of each open, there you would see two Firefox and two file browser icons. Now for XFC, there's a new applet called the dock-like taskbar, which is already a default in MX Linux, and I think they're working on upstreaming it to be the default in XFC itself. So XFC will have the option. I'm using it in XFC because it's just a very nicer experience. But I think they wanted to make it default so that you can just do the right click and pin to the panel in XFC.
now,
I don't know how it works in Mate though.
with Ubuntu Mate, you have two panels, one at the top and one at the bottom, and your active applications are at the bottom, and all of your data stuff is at the top panel, including anything that you pin to panel will be at that top panel instead of at the bottom panel with your running applications.
Yes, but there are still different layouts. So because there are single
I'm
panel
talking
layouts.
about the stock layout.
Okay, I just
Now, I
assumed
know, like Moss, we had a conversation about this. He deletes that top one and just puts everything onto the bottom one. So,
You can combine the two panels and put it top or bottom as you wish. What I wanted to say is, like in XFCE, if you use the click on and add to panel like you were doing in Cinnamon, it puts the application all the way on the far right instead of over on the left with the rest of your apps.
yeah,
And you have to then go in and move it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
yes,
because
you
it-
can do that, but in Mate, I just got to the use to just doing the drag, and it works great.
That's kind of cool. Now, even if it was on the right, as long as there was something there for me to quickly click instead of having to open the menu every time, that's kind of what I want. And now, I also installed several applications to start out with. I installed VLC, I installed X2Go server and client both, and then I also installed Kden Live and Chrome. SSHFS worked without an issue and without me having to install anything else. Just typed in the command and I was able to mount everything from my server. Now, one thing that I noticed while transferring files onto the device is that the Wi-Fi would drop and then pick up every few minutes. But I have no way of knowing if that's a hardware issue or not. Now, I know it's not an issue with the Wi-Fi module because that Wi-Fi module was previously in one of my tablets and worked just fine. But this laptop that I put it on does have some type of power issue where it's not working correctly from the battery. I know I've mentioned that on the show before. So if it is having some type of power distribution issue, maybe it's just not sending enough power to that Wi-Fi adapter. So I removed this issue from the equation by switching to my port replicator. That was a previous project and is normally used for my Pis that has an Ethernet built in. Vast improvements, didn't have to worry about the network dropping while I was doing an update or an install or transferring files or anything like that. While using Kden Live, I noticed that in the menus I could not read anything due to the color of the text and the color of the background. This was a theming issue that became less of a problem when I switched away from the stock theme. The version of Kden was a different one from the one that installs in the Mint depots. I also installed Barrier on my laptop and my garage computer, which is the one I'm using right now. Barrier is a fork of Synergy, if anybody remembers that. and it's a virtual KVM. It allows me to use a single mouse and keyboard on 2 different systems, or many different systems if I really wanted to, and have in the past. What I noticed is that on Ubuntu, the snap was installed, and on Mint, the deb installed, which was a previous version, so they would not work together. Now, I could have gone in and, found the correct repo and added that to Linux Mint and then got that running with a deb. But it was just much easier to force the snap to install on Mint, and then everything worked as expected. I can just slide my mouse all the way over to the right side of my screen and through the side of the screen into the other computer. Now,
Did you install it, the snap of it from the Mate app boutique?
No, I use the command line.
Okay, so there was no deb in the Ubuntu repos for it anymore?
Say again?
Was there a deb at all for it in the Ubuntu repos?
I don't know.
So maybe if there was, it could have worked with the deb on Mint.
Maybe. Okay, and now I set the laptop up on the table, which is connected to my theater chair that I'm sitting in right now and that I use for work. And I'm able to use both my regular desktop that I use for work and the laptop at the same time. It's really kind of convenient when I just need to do something small and I don't need to take up any more screen real estate on my main computer. So I do highly recommend that you try out Barrier if you are running multiple systems. That
Here is an answer from an Alexa.
Was that Alexa?
Yeah, it's set to use the word computer.
That might be a hot word that's too generic.
That's true, but everybody's gotten used to it, and I'd rather use that than the A word.
Then you could just avoid using the word computer in the context.
Yeah, I could
use
try.
PC.
It doesn't work out very well. I could also see what other words were available. Last I looked, there wasn't a whole lot of choice. And then I'd have to convince my family that using the new word was better than using the old word.
Is there an option for it to learn a new
There
word?
is not,
So
and I really wish there was,
Interesting.
because I would probably change it to a swear word. Just for the fun of it. That would convince my family to use it. Okay. Moss?
Yeah. Am I supposed to wake up and say something now?
Or make me a pot of coffee.
No, I couldn't pass the coffee through the screen, Joe.
Well, come over to the house.
It's a bit far. You'd be waiting for a while.
We'll wait.
Are you paying for my gas?
Guess that depends on how good the coffee is.
Anyhow, I have so far installed Mate, Lubuntu, Unity, and Ubuntu Studio. Some of my responses will be covered more thoroughly in the next edition of DistroHopper's Digest. As everyone knows by now, I am one of those filthy multi-booters. As such, my greatest disappointment was the inability to install and use Grub Customizer. Apparently, some library got orphaned, and rather than fix Grub Customizer, or adopt the library, or make something new, they just dropped it from the repo, and you can't install it from Debian's repo either. Manually editing Grub does just not get the job done here, and I have not even been successful installing and running Refind. I assume Norbert has something to say on that, but it just doesn't run. I installed it.
Well, all I have to say is that I had to reinstall Refind, but for some reason, every time I tried to install Refind from a live system, it wouldn't install properly. So I did what I usually do. I usually just install Refind when I'm installing either Void or Arch or Fedora, and for Void and Arch, I just install it when I'm in the CH root. So because I didn't have Arch on it, I just had Void, Fedora, and Debian. I just installed Arch on it and cherooted into it, and I installed Refined. So right now I don't have 3, I have 4 distros on it. So I might be coming for your record of having 5 distros at the same time on a machine.
Oh, that's
I
not
might
my
be coming
record.
for a record.
That's not close to my record.
Oh, what's your record?
At one time on the Kudu 3, I had 8 distros, and I was actually expanding it to 12. No, I had 10 distros, and I was going to expand it to 12. And while I was doing that, I gave up and contracted it to 8. It wasn't
Okay.
any frustration, but I think 10 is my record, although I had 12 partitions on the Kudu.
Okay, so I only have one drive in it, and I might not be able to afford to have more than like
This
6
was
or
on a
7
single
or
1
8.
terabyte SSD.
Okay, I only have a 250 or 240
Right.
gigabyte SSD.
5
So
is good.
I might not be able to break your record, but I could try. I will probably not because I just can't afford to partition it up to that many partitions.
If you're keeping your data externally, you don't
I
need
don't.
even as much as 20 gigabytes for a distro.
I know
So
I have.
maybe have a separate partition for your data that you access from all your other installations. But
Well,
you don't need as much as 20 gigabytes for a distro installation.
I actually have 20 gigabyte root partitions, 3 of them. For Arch, I just gave 10 gigabytes because I just wanted to install it to get my bootloader working again. I didn't really want to use it. So I do have, I think I have space for like 7 20 gigabytes partitions, maybe not even that, maybe like 5 or 6. Okay, I decided not to pursue breaking your records.
Okay.
You can have your record of 10 systems.
I'm
Okay.
not sure it's any record, but it's my record. Anyhow, Lubuntu has frequent desktop flashes, sometimes slower or faster depending on what app I was in, which apparently can only be solved by enabling a Compton-like compositor. It's supposedly already installed, but I haven't found where in the menus it is. I also hate being nagged to save my files as if I had any open when I go to reboot or shut down. That is a very big issue with me in Lubuntu. It always feels like it's not complete, but I haven't found out in what way it is not complete. It seems to do everything I ask it to do. It just feels empty for some reason. All of my simple games install on 22.04, but PySol FC does not open in any flavor I've yet tried. You can click on the icon in the menu and nothing happens. I have not been able to find out where it goes. It installs, the icon shows up, and it doesn't run. Okay, Unity looks good, but apparently still has bugs. DistroTube did a good video on it. I have a link in the show notes. Hoping to really like it, but finding some flaws. Mate gave me some real trouble, refusing to boot after installation. It turns out it created its distro partition as EFI rather than as ext4. When I changed that, it wouldn't install at all because it couldn't find an EFI partition. When I created a small EFI partition, it did install, but Studio still held the grub and would not recognize the EFI partition, so it still wouldn't run. So I installed Mint on another partition, used Grub Customizer, and it all works now. I do not understand why Studio did not demand an EFI partition, but Mate did, but that's what happened. Firefox opens very slowly, no matter which flavor, due to it being a snap. Norbert already discussed the exact times. All I know is it's slow, and I don't like having to wait. It's so slow that I wonder if I clicked it, and I usually open 2 or 3 packages trying to get it to open. Anyhow,
I wonder if you installed Flatpak and then you installed the Flatpak compatibility plugin for GNOME software. Would Flatpaks show up in the Ubuntu Software Center? Because the Ubuntu Software Center itself is a snap. So if I wanted to use Flatpaks, what I would do is if I would install the regular deb for the GNOME software and have Flatpaks in that. And if I don't want to use snaps, I might try removing the snap store, which is Ubuntu software. I have no idea whether that breaks system updates or not.
I'm very much interested in looking at Rudra's little package where he actually comes up with an independent app store that includes Snap Flatpaks and the Ubuntu repo.
Yeah, those are great. There are even some projects that have app images, Flatpaks and snaps, but no native packages. But using something like that and then having snaps or Flatpaks in the default file, Software Center might be redundant.
If they
I
are
think
properly identified, so you know which one you're installing.
yeah. I really should. It would be interesting. I should try and integrate Flatpaks into Ubuntu 22.04 itself, and see whether the regular Ubuntu store can handle them or not.
Well, I would like
I
to
should.
revisit all these things in 2204.1 to see if they fixed anything. But that's it for me.
That makes for a pretty quick innards then.
I'm happy.
Mm-hmm. All right, then let's move on to vibrations from the ether. Moss,
The first
you
one
wanted the
we
first
have
one?
from Matt Rice. It says, guys, first and foremost, I just want to say that I love the show and have been a listener for a couple of years now. I've been running Mint as my daily driver on my home, work, and laptop computers. I'm not a new Linux user, and I'm not really a distro hopper either. I've heard/seen/read that Mint is a, quote, beginner, end quote, Linux operating system. This bugs me. It's Linux. If I load Fedora, Arch, or any other distro with my favorite desktop, Cinnamon, what difference does it make under the hood? I mean, I chose Mint because it just works. I have the ability to try all the other distros easily by swapping drives or in a VM. I don't see what makes any other distro better than Mint. Would love to hear your thoughts on the show. Say hi to Bill for me. He is a fellow Fort Wayne resident. Signed, Matt.
Well,
I
Matt,
think.
I have to agree with you that there's really not much difference under the hood. I mean, there's some philosophical differences between, say, Ubuntu and Linux Mint, but it's marginal. But yeah, it really is the same. The difference is that a lot of your other ones are more difficult to use in some cases, as opposed to just working.
But if you want to talk about under the hood stuff, I think if you want to compare something like Linux Mint or Fedora, maybe the underlying system, so the package format that the system uses, and also because they are packaged by different developers,
Yeah.
maybe security updates might arrive at a different rate,
Right.
and even feature updates. Because if you want feature updates for native packages that are not Flex or Snaps,
Yeah.
Fedora will have feature updates, but Linux Mint and Ubuntu will not. And
right. I mean, you could get down to the nitty gritty and say,
yeah,
Fedora
and
uses Yum, Arch uses AUR, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But essentially, they're all sitting on top of the Linux kernel.
And like
And
we
they're
were
all
mentioning
Linux.
a few episodes ago, that over the years, Clem gets slammed for this or that or the other thing, but the longer time goes along, the more it looks like he makes the right decisions.
another important difference I think is support. How long a release has support, because Ubuntu LTS releases and therefore Mint releases have 5 years of regular support and security updates, and they have released, so Mint has releases every 2 years. Fedora is a much faster moving project. It has releases every 6 months, and each release has only 30 months of support time. So
And
you
then
could
Arch,
you
you're
could
doing it all yourself.
yeah, Arch basically doesn't have version numbers at all. You just have small updates each day. But with Fedora, basically you could update every 6 months to a new release. You could skip every other one, then update yearly, basically.
Well, but Mint has every 6 months roughly, and easy upgrades from one to the next.
Yeah.
And on top of that, it has long-term support for all of their versions.
Yes, but the main repo, the Ubuntu repo, doesn't change for the Mint 6 month releases, which it makes it less likely to break, I guess, if you were to upgrade from like Mint 20 to 21.
But in the end, it's a matter of personal preference. I mean, there are reasons to use Arch. I mean, if you need absolutely bleeding edge for your graphics or whatever, then yeah, maybe Arch is a good way to go. But
And if you like your machine breaking frequently, yeah.
yeah, I mean, you're going to have problems and you're going to have to, fix it yourself, but that's part of the price you pay, and maybe it's
If
worth
you really
it
want to, if you really want your system to break, you should use any distro, but use the experimental repos.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody picked the second letter. Someone should read it. Joe, I think you've been underrepresented today.
Okay, and this letter is from Bob Belk. I just listened to this podcast, and your network performance specs on the RPI are dated and not accurate. The RPI 3B Plus was fitted with a 1 gigabyte network plug that was limited by the USB 2.0 backbone to about 230 Mbps. The 4B has been tested to be about 940 Mbps. Enjoy your show, Bob. Thank you, Bob. And yeah, we did not get into the specifics on what the networking was for the 3B and the 4B specifically. So thank you for the exact numbers. We appreciate that.
And for anyone not following it, RPI is Raspberry Pi.
Yeah. So now I do believe on that show we did mention that the 1 gigabit network plug on the 3B was limited by the USB 2.0 backbone because, yeah, it shares with the USB. Now, I don't know specifically on the 4B if it's got its own, then it would be 940 Mbps. But if it is on the same backbone as the USB, then anytime you're doing heavy USB usage, wouldn't that also impact how fast the network connection is? I'd have to look it up. Or get back to us again. Hey, Bob, if you want to come on the show and talk about it, I'm cool with that too. Always happy to do another Pi show. And unless somebody else has something to add there. All right, we're going to move on to check this out. And Moss?
Well, the first thing that came up was Stuart Langridge has published his latest version of Hushboard, which technically will mute your mic while you're typing so people don't hear clackety clackety clack. I have installed it and it doesn't seem to work for me, but I think Norbert said he was going to install it and it didn't seem to work for him. But it's nice.
I installed it too.
Nice that people are looking at it.
And because it's a Flatpak, I thought maybe we should look at its permissions in FlatSeal. And there's a toggle on FlatSeal that says permission to all devices like webcam. So I assume that must include the microphones as well. So I turned that on, restarted Hushboard, and it still didn't work. Maybe we missed something. Maybe we didn't start it properly. But it's a really nice
well,
thing.
If anyone else wants to check it out, then they can get back to us at how it worked or didn't work for them.
Yeah, because it's nice because then if I'm talking to someone, they wouldn't have to hear this.
Yeah. The other thing I have here is Pica Backup. That's Pika. It's the 9 to 5 Linux Flatpak app of the week. It seems to be an easier to use backup system. It looks prettier than, say, whatever else you're using.
It's also a Gnome Circle app.
Yes,
So,
it's a GTK4 app.
yeah, and those generally look nice because first when the GTK4 and Libot Beta came out, they had this really nice and modern flat gray theme, but the gray might look a bit boring. But then there are a lot of GTK4 apps keep coming out that sort of defy this conception of GTK just being boring and gray. Because I have another Gnome Circle app here, which is the Emerald music player that I mentioned in the news, which is just great. It looks and feels like a GTK4 app, but it also changes the entire color scheme of the whole window based on the album art of the song that you are playing, and it's really nice. So I really like how there's an influx of really nice looking GTK4 apps.
Well, Pica is available from the FlatHub repo or from GNOME Software or Plasma Discover or your distro's app store.
And so is Emerald. Joe?
Okay, and I have a link for a YouTube channel that I just recently found. It is called the Linux Experiment, and they have Linux tips, reviews, games, and news. It's basically a weekly, or in some cases bi-weekly, news show on YouTube. So if you don't get all of your Linux news through audio, from Moss's other show, then I highly recommend checking this out. The couple of videos that I've watched from them, about 20 minutes in length or less, have been really good. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this next week's episode.
It was the very first Linux-related channel that I found when I switched to Linux.
Ah.
And Nick, the guy who's running it, it's just very enjoyable to listen to him talk.
He
And
does present very well.
Yeah, he also did videos like topic. He also does a lot of topic-based videos, like what is the future of GTK theming, and is Linux, is how, so he addresses sort of like video essays. I really enjoy those. I only recently started watching his news show a few weeks ago, and it sort of became my number one source of Linux news, because I found that he just finds and covers a lot more stuff that other Linux shows that I've listened to. So I can recommend it as well.
All right. And that's it for Check This Out. And now for our housekeeping and announcements. Thank you for listening to this episode of mintCast. If you see something that you'd like to hear about, tell us. Send us an email, mintcast@gmail.org. Join us live on YouTube. Post at the mintCast subreddit. Chat with us on Telegram or Discord or Facebook. Or post directly at mintcast.org. We would like volunteers to help with audio editing, as we are very far behind at this time. A list of episodes needing work is being prepared at this time. Experience in editing multiple Audacity streams will be helpful. And you can get with us on either Telegram or Discord to let us know if you want to help. Our next episode will be at 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on June 12th, 2022. We do have a link in the show notes to convert that to your time zone. Our next live stream will be at 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on June 4th, 2022. And we also have a link to convert that to your time zone. Live stream information is at mintcast.org/livestream. And now for our wrap-up. If you like the sound of my voice, you can catch me on a couple other podcasts that I'm on. I'm on the Linux Link Tech Show, which you can find at tllts.org. I'm on the Linux Lugcast, which is at linuxlugcast.com. You can send me an email directly, jb@mintcast.org, or you can buy me a coffee using my Ko-fi link. Moss?
Well, you can hear more of me at Full Circle Weekly News on Distro Hoppers Digest. My email is bardmoss@pm.me. My contact information otherwise is found on itsmoss.com. Norbert?
You can send me an email at norbert@mintcast.org, and we have a little update on the situation where we thought we would have to migrate our stuff from. We thought we would not have access. We wouldn't be able to keep our mintcast emails because of the changes with the Google Workspaces, but turns out we can keep them. So we will just we will just be able to send emails to these addresses, and mintcast@mintcast.org will also be we will also be able to use that.
Thank you, Bill.
Yep. Bill is also working on migrating us anyway, just in case this happens again in the future. That way we have at least two systems that we can work with. And Bill wasn't able to make it onto the show today because he went on a vacation. But if you want to reach him, you can get him at wchauser3@gmail.com, or Bill_H on Discord, or at WCHauser3 on Twitter, and WCHauser3 on Facebook also. And you can check out his other podcast, Three Fat Truckers, at 3ftpodcast.org. Nishant was also not able to make the show today. And if you want to send him an email, you can send him at nishant@mintcast.org. You can send him something on Instagram using ReconGhost, or ReconGhost at GitHub, ghost.recon on Discord. Maverick00783 on Steam. Now, before we leave, we want to make sure to acknowledge some of the people who make mintCast possible. Norbert and Tony H for our audio editing. Also, I think Owen's done some recently. Josh Lowe for all his work on the website. Hobstar for our logo. InitRD for the animated Discord logo. And Londoner for our time sync. Bytemark Hosting for hosting mintcast.org and our Mumble server. Archive.org for hosting our audio files. HPR for our backup Mumble room. Mike, well, okay, bye Mike. The Linux Mint development team for the fine distro we love to talk about. Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem.
Yeah, somebody unupdated our show notes.
Sorry, I'm the one that I couldn't. I just copied the template when I moved the housekeeping to the end.
Owen has not yet actually done any
I thought he
recent
had.
editing for us. He said he would be available, and I don't think we actually asked him to do one
Okay.
because of his time. Tony filled in rather nicely, though.
Well,
Okay, so Mike is not in this version of the show notes, and if we make the next show notes as a copy of this one, it won't be in that either.
Well, I
Also,
use the- I use
we
the
don't
template.
use the
We
backup
need to
Mumble
Yeah,
server.
we can just remove that line from the template, and then we won't have this problem.
yeah.
We don't have
Well,
a
we
backup
have-
Mumble server anymore because they've even moved their Mumble server.
Yeah. We have updated the template before. I don't know how it got back in.
Well,
So
I
I-
am stopping Audacity
Yep, me too.
at
Well,
hour
I-
28.
Oof,
That
that's
is a record, right?
fast show.
And export.
388.
I forgot to mention the other reason why I switched to the empty display manager is it gives a very easy option to have passwordless login, but at the same time very easily choose a session, because if you want to choose a session, you usually have to click a session list in your login manager and click one of them. But in EMPTTY, you just enter your name and password, then you have a list of sessions with numbers, and you just type the number and press enter. Now it is able to have automatic login, so when you boot the system, you will immediately be dropped to the session list. You don't have to type your name and email. You just, maybe if there's no Gnome XFCE and Sway and something else, and they have numbers, so I just press a number of whichever I want to log into, and I will log into that. And by default, I can just press enter and be logged into the one that I used for the last time. It makes for easy desktop hopping.
Yep.
I should just say this all this in my next notes. Sorry. Wanderings.
Probably.
And I've exported, and I will start uploading.
Well, it was a good show. I think our fans will be happy it's short. We don't even have to cut this one up. We just release it as is.
Yeah. And hey,
All we'd
I've
have to do is cut out the 388.5 line.
Yeah. I found a podcast called the Linux Cast, and they have like short episodes, like between 60 and 90 minutes, around 70 minutes. And they still managed to have some wanderings and some innards and some news, but there's only 2 hosts, so that might be the reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it Rob and Isaac?
No, it's someone. They're called Matt and Tyler. I don't really know them. I know that they have a YouTube channel where they do videos other than the podcast.
Thanks, Londoner. We appreciate you listening.
Is Londoner about the only one that was listening?
Well, Bill got on for a minute onto the YouTube, but Max Concurrent was 2, so yeah, probably.
Well, mine's about halfway through the upload.
Is Londoner still here?
Probably. I haven't ended the
We
stream
could
yet.
we could ask him about maybe joining the mintCast crew on Discord.
I thought his connection wasn't quite good enough. But if he wants to join the
Well,
Discord,
he can join the team in the Discord. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he will be able to see the crew
Well,
discussion.
I know that Eric the Unready, who provides my news files for Full Circle Weekly News, is also in South Africa, and he says they've been having twice daily blackouts,
Ugh.
and it's been so bad that when the power is on, it's not on long enough to recharge his UPS.
Ugh.
But I just did get another news file today, so I've got another episode to put out in the next couple of days.
I have to make a confession. I haven't listened to Full Circle Weekly News yet.
Well, you should. It's a
Yes,
nice
but
short podcast.
Yeah, I heard Bill. I think he said that he really liked it, so maybe I should give it a try too. I also
It
didn't
takes
mention
10 minutes or less. You don't
Yeah.
lose too much time. I wish I could take it to 15 minutes because some of these are getting a lot of articles in a week, and I have to basically say almost nothing about them and just leave the links in the show notes. Okay, mine's up. Mine's bigger than Joe's.
Mine is
It's the size is
Uploading.
not what matters, right, Joe?
I'm ignoring you, Moss.
Yes, I know.
Oh, I have no idea what I did, but mine is 400 megabytes.
Yeah,
I should
you
have a
messed
look
that
at
up.
it. Yeah.
Well, you might have left your
I-
mic on more. I noticed that there at the end that I had my mic open while I was typing, and I apologize for that.
Maybe it's just stereo instead of mono.
Yeah, it should not be stereo.
It's mono.
Okay.
Okay, so I export. Oh, I exported into Wave and not FLAC. Okay, that's the reason.
All right, now I'm ending the stream.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Okay, I will now have to re-export.
Well, I
And
will talk
my-
to everyone on Saturday.